So we're going to have a quick look at the kettlebell deadlift and then a quick look at what's called the hike and park, which is how you start a set of swings. So, the reason we do the deadlift as part of learning how to swing is that from a hips perspective and from a tension perspective and from a breathing perspective, it's all the same. The only different thing is with the kettlebell swing is you drive the hips so hard that that they fire the kettlebell up and it floats back down. With the deadlift, you're just keeping the arms planted down here, okay? So, I'll do the front angle first. You're going to stand in that ideal foot position that you've already practiced, because that's the first thing you always do before you do a swing or a deadlift with a kettlebell. Set the feet, drive the hips forward, get some tension in the glutes and the core, so arse cheeks and belly. Squeeze those a bit, push down into the lats a bit as well. Remember, that's your top position. From there, relax off a little bit, pull the hips back in the same way as you were learning on that very first drill in the first video, at the start of this one. Get those hips back, and you should ideally be able to loop your fingers around the kettlebell handle. Stand up and squeeze. Pull the hips back. Kettlebell lands exactly where you picked it up from, not out in front of you, okay? Breathe in on the way down. Okay? That downward phase is nice and slow and controlled because we haven't got the kettlebell moving ballistically yet, alright? Show you from the side. So as you can see from the side, I'm completely hiding the kettlebell because I'm standing directly over it, alright? My nuts are pointing towards the handle, okay? A lot of the time you end up people staying with it out here. That's not over the top, that's slightly behind. We want over the top. So from here, the first and most important thing after you set the feet is to just get the hips back. And by moving those hips back and letting those knees bend slightly, you should be low enough to grab the kettlebell, stand up, get tight. Tight in here, and tight under there. See the kettlebell lands exactly where I picked it up, not out in front of me, okay? Got to keep those arms straight and use those lats to keep those arms close. So, that's the kettlebell deadlift. So if you can do the wall drill well, if you understand tension and breathing well, you can plant your feet properly, you can crack on and start practicing the deadlift. Make sure you have something to check your reflection in, like a phone or iPad on selfie mode, or a mirror. And just make sure that when you're in that downward phase, it's being led by the hips and thighs, pulling backwards and the knees bending slightly, rather than leaning forwards into it, okay? We don't want this. See that those hips are barely moving there. All right, we want that pronounced hip dominant movement where we're closing that angle between the belly and the thigh. Yeah, this straight 180 degree angle is closing as those hips pull back. All right, so that's your deadlift. Once you're quite comfortable with the deadlift, you can move on to the next bit, which is the hike and park, which is basically how we start a kettlebell swing and how we finish one. So, if you've got downstairs neighbours, something like a gardening mat, or if not, maybe a book, is always good to have underneath the kettlebell so that when you plonk it down, you don't like make a thundering great crash for your downstairs neighbours. Especially mine, I've got a baby that likes to cry a lot, so I don't want to get blamed for that. Alright, so the kettlebell hike is how we start. It's called a hike because it's like...
I don't know that one.
Oh, shut up. It's called a hike because it's like American football, where they hike it back to the players behind them. But in this instance, we're not going to let go of the kettlebell, okay? So you're going to plant your feet. Kettlebell's out slightly in front of you, but not so far that you have to break your form to reach it. You're going to bring yourself down in that deadlift position. A little bit of a bend in the knees. you're going to reach forward and tilt that kettlebell towards you. From there, head aligned with the body. So we're not up like this, we're not down like that, we're just in the middle. Eyes maybe a metre or two in front of you. And from there, you're going to hike the bell and let it come back to the mat. Okay, the reason we do that is because when we start a set of swings, we hike it, bam, and then we fire that fucking hike into the first swing. Okay, so getting this is really important. It's also really important because on the last swing, as you come down into that hike, you need to place the kettlebell back safely on the floor without losing your form as well. Okay, so if we're doing it from the side, so this time, as you can see, kettlebell is slightly out in front of me, feet and then hips, arms down, reaching out, okay? So the kettlebell's just out in front. It's not so far out in front that I've got to reach for it and lose my alignment. So from there, breathe in, hike and back, hike and back. Imagine you're going to throw this kettlebell behind you. You try to really load up the hamstrings, okay? So, that's the kettlebell hike. Starting with it slightly out in front to give you some leverage to pull on, and you're pulling it back into this position, not letting yourself dip, not standing up out of it, just literally from here, hike it, then get it back to the mat, okay? So that's the next drill. Oh, look at me getting a fucking sweat on. So that's the kettlebell hike. Practice the deadlift, practice the hike. I only do 5 at a time with the hike because it does put a lot of lactic acid into the thighs, which we don't want. Once you've nailed those movements, you feel good with the rhythm of the hips, feel good with that tension, remember glutes, abs and lats, then you can start turning that hike into an actual swing, okay? It's normal when you're doing this for your low back muscles, these ones here, it's quite normal when you're learning it that they start to ache and start to feel hot because you're going to be inevitably overusing them, okay? So don't worry about that, but if things start to get painful, fucking stop, okay? But apart from that, these drills are excellent drills. They're the drills that we've used for years to teach people. It's how I was taught to teach people, so they really work, they're really fundamental. And then the next video is the fucking kettlebell swing, right? I mean, which basically comes down to practicing everything you've learned already and just a little bit more, because that kettlebell's now going to be swinging out in front of you and coming back down at a reasonable speed, okay?